Story number 2. The 7 Jars. Many years ago, there was a barber. He was the king's barber. The barber lived with his wife in a small cottage. They were not rich, but they were not poor either. Every month, the king paid the barber his wages, and with this money, they bought whatever they needed. The barber was not happy, however. He wanted to be rich. "Save as much as you can," he said to his wife. "You ought to have more gold ornaments. When we have saved up enough money, I shall buy you a beautiful necklace. I want you to look like a rich man's wife." So the barber and his wife saved up as much money as they could spare. When they had enough, they went together to the goldsmith and bought a gold necklace. The barber's wife was very pleased. "Now you begin to look like a rich man's wife," the barber said to her. The barber was still not satisfied, however. He often wished he could somehow get more gold. One evening he went out for a walk in the woods near his home. He sat down under a tree and, as usual, began thinking about gold. "I wish I could get more gold," he thought to himself. At that moment, the barber heard a voice. It seemed to come from the top of the tree. "Barber, barber," called the voice. "Do you want to be rich? Do you want gold?" "Yes, yes," cried the barber. "That's right. I want to be rich. I want gold." "How much gold do you want?" asked the voice. "Do you want 7 jars of gold?" "Yes, yes," cried the barber. 7 jars. That's right. I want 7 jars of gold." "All right then," the voice replied. "Go home, barber. You will find the 7 jars waiting for you there." The barber jumped up at once and ran towards his cottage. "Can it be true?" he asked himself. "Perhaps I'm only dreaming. 7 jars of gold. Just think of it." The barber ran all the way home. "Wife, wife," he called as soon as he reached the cottage. His wife came hurrying to the door. She was smiling happily. "Wife, have you seen anything?" he asked. "Come and see," she cried. She led him into the room. Yes, there they were on the floor. 7 jars. "Do you know what's inside these jars, wife?" the barber said. "Gold, my dear, gold. Let me show you." The barber picked up the first jar and took off the lid. Sure enough, it was full of gold. "You see, wife," cried the barber, "we are rich. We have 7 jars full of gold." Feeling happy and excited, the barber began to dance around the room. His wife sat near the jars and, one by one, took off their lids to see the gold inside. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, she counted as she took off each lid. "They're all full of gold," she said. "How wonderful!" As she took the lid off the 7th jar, however, she gave a cry of surprise. The 7th jar was half empty. "This one's half empty," she cried. "What is this?" exclaimed the barber. "How is this jar half empty?" The barber and his wife sat gazing sadly at the 7th jar. Well, it can't be helped, I suppose," said the barber at last. "But why should we keep this jar half empty, wife? Let us fill it up so that it's like the others." "Fill it up?" said his wife. "What shall we fill it out with?" "Why, gold, of course," answered the barber. "Where shall we get so much gold from?" his wife replied. "Well, we must save some more money," the barber said. "And anyway, we have your gold ornaments. We can begin with those. I'll ask the goldsmith to melt them down, then we can put the gold in the jar." "But husband," the wife objected, "you said you wanted me to look like a rich man's wife." "You're a foolish woman," replied the barber. "It is true that rich men give their wives gold ornaments to wear, but those men are not the richest men. The richest men keep their gold in jars like these. When we have 7 jars full of gold, we shall be really rich." The barber took his wife's ornaments to the goldsmith. The goldsmith melted them down, and the barber put the gold in the 7th jar. The jar was still not nearly full, however. "Don't spend so much money, wife," the barber said. "We're eating too much. Buy less food, then we can save more money." The barber and his wife began to eat less and less. They both grew quite thin. The king noticed that the barber had grown very thin and always looked worried. "What is the matter with you, barber?" asked the king one day. "Why are you always so sad these days? You have grown quite thin too. Are you ill?" No, your majesty," replied the barber. "I'm not ill. I'm worried about money, that's all." "I see," replied the king. "Do you need more money?" "Yes, more money. That's what I need," answered the barber. "Well," said the king, "I'll double your wages. Will that do?" "Oh, thank you, your majesty," the barber exclaimed with joy. "Now everything will be all right." The barber began to save more and more money. He bought more and more gold, but still the seventh jar was not filled. "Buy less food," the barber told his wife. "How can we buy more gold if you spend so much money on food?" The king noticed that the barber still looked sad and worried. "Barber," said the king one day, "I've doubled your wages, but you still look very worried. You're getting thinner and thinner. What is the matter?" The barber did not know what to say. How could he explain to the king that he wanted gold? More gold, nothing but gold. He had told no one about the 7 jars. Suddenly the king spoke again. "I know what it is," cried the king. "It's the 7 jars. You have received the 7 jars, haven't you?" The barber was astonished. How did you know, your majesty?" he asked. The king laughed. "I know," he replied, "because I was once offered those jars. I heard a voice in a tree offering them to me." "Didn't you accept them then?" asked the barber. "Yes, I did," replied the king, "but I knew at once that something was wrong. The voice offered me 7 jars full of gold, but I found that the 7th jar was half empty." "That's right," cried the barber. "The 7th jar is half empty." "So I went back to the voice in the tree," the king went on. "The 7th jar is half empty," I said. "That's right," replied the voice. "The 7th jar is always half empty." "What happened then?" asked the barber. "Then," the king went on, "I asked the voice if the gold was to be spent or kept in the jars." "And what did he reply?" asked the barber eagerly. "He did not reply at all," answered the king. "So then I went home and I sat down and thought about those jars." "Yes?" said the barber. "Suddenly," the king went on, "I understood what the voice meant when it said, 'The 7th jar is always half empty.' He meant that however hard I might try to refill it, it would never be filled. I saw then that it was a trap to catch me, to make me desire more and more gold. Since the jar could never be filled, my desire for gold would never end." "A trap!" exclaimed the barber. "Yes," continued the king, "it was a trap, but I saw through it. I was not caught. The 7th jar was the jar of desire, you see. The more you get, the more you want, and there's no end to it." "How did you get out of the trap then?" asked the barber. "It was very simple," replied the king. "I went once more to the tree and said to the voice, 'Take back your 7 jars of gold. I don't want them.'" "And what happened?" asked the barber. "All right," the voice said, answered the king. "I'll take them back." And when I reached home, the jars had gone. "So the 7th jar can never be filled," said the barber thoughtfully. "Are you quite sure, your majesty?" "There is no doubt about it," the king replied. "Give back those jars, barber, before it is too late. You're thin and ill. What good can come of this great desire for more and more gold? Give back those jars, I say, before you fall into even greater trouble." The barber was very frightened by the king's words. He ran at once to the tree in the wood and asked the voice to take back the 7 jars. "All right, I will," replied the voice. When the barber reached home, the 7 jars had vanished. And with them, of course, vanished all the gold that the barber had saved, and all his wife's ornaments. End of the 7 jars.